Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined by BadgerBlitz.com publisher and editor-in-chief, John McNamara. John, good to see you as always.
Absolutely, Matt. Good to be back on here on a Monday.
It is good to be back here on a Monday. I like this little routine we've gotten into here, John. So I think we'll keep it going probably throughout fall camp, if not into the season. We appreciate everyone in the Badgers Den for tuning in and sending us some questions for this week. So we had a ton of good ones. We're going to start with a little basketball, though, John. So obviously the 2025 class is coming together, but the Den wants to know who you think our best bets are to land over the next two cycles. So I think the 25 and the 26 cycle.
Yeah, I think if you look at the top remaining target, or if I think Greg Gard had his pick, it would likely be Davion Hanna, the kid who played at Nicolet, but now is moving to Link Prep. Not sure exactly what it is. It's in Missouri, but he's not going to be playing at Nicolet anymore. Obviously, Wisconsin has, invested a lot of time into him. He's a Rivals 150 kid. Would really be, that type of player, I think, in that mold of AJ Storr, where, an athletic wing can get to the basket, can do a lot of, different things that the offense has traditionally lacked. So I think that he's probably your top overall target. Now, do they get him? If I had to pick today, I'd say likely no. But, every time I talk to him and when I've been able to see him play live, he talks about his relationship with Greg Gard and how strong that is. So, Wisconsin's in that mix. Again, I don't know that it's going to play out. I think Alabama's got some buzz right now, but, it'll be interesting to see where he takes officials and kind of where things shake out in his recruitment. In terms of who might be a little bit more realistic, the Travion Fenderson, who Wisconsin offered a year ago at their advanced camp, is someone that obviously the Badgers have now put a lot of energy into for the last year. Sounds like he is going to also go the out-of-state route. I think he's going to go to a prep school, and that was kind of always the plan. I thought he would play maybe another year at the Prairie School in Racine before going, but it sounds like he could do that this upcoming year. He's, I guess, technically a 2025 kid, and that's where Wisconsin would love to add him. But I think his plan, again, is to reclassify to 2026 and kind of see where things shake out there with him in that class. Wisconsin's been there for a very long time. Iowa State just offered, and I think that should kind of raise some eyebrows because Iowa State has traditionally done very well with kids from inside the state of Wisconsin. Now, they just recently got Jamarian Bateman, a kid that didn't have a Wisconsin offer, but Xavier Mitchell in this class. So, they have done very well with kids from inside the state. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. And then, if you look in staying in that 2025 class, Wisconsin recently put it out an offer to Tommy Amon, a kid from, I guess he's moved from the Dakotas now to Minneapolis. So, they'll get an official visit from him. I guess they'd like to pair him now with Will Garlock in that class. So, adding bigs is certainly an emphasis now for Wisconsin's 2025 class, with Garlock committed and potentially a guy like Anneman added to this group.
One of the things you notice, or I've noticed, and has been discussed on the boards in the Den, is the WIAA's refusal to sort of get with modern basketball. And you've mentioned that we see some of these kids, going to prep schools out of state. We've seen that happen, more and more often. Do you think that is affecting Wisconsin Badger basketball recruiting?
I do. I should start with, I guess, with the first part. I think kids leaving the state, there's a correlation to not having a shot clock. Now, if you ask these kids if that's their first reason for leaving, it's not going to be like, well, I wanted to play with a shot clock, right? But I think that's part of it. NIL is part of it, being able to capitalize more outside the state of Wisconsin on opportunities that are available to kids. So, and then when a kid leaves the state, it doesn't disqualify them. It doesn't make them, a kid that Wisconsin can no longer recruit. But obviously, I think if Wisconsin had its pick, they would make sure a kid like Davion Hanna stayed inside the state, because only if it's because he's an hour away from campus. Fenderson's in that same boat of, we'd love to keep him here, likely because we can get him on campus a little bit easier. He's an hour and hour 45, maybe 2 hours away from campus. So I don't know that it's like a crippling thing, but it certainly impacts that because, then Hannah this year will be playing on I guess a larger scale than he would be at Nicolet. So there's more eyeballs on him there. But I guess you could also argue that, plenty of schools are seeing him on the AAU circuit as well. So, maybe not a huge thing, but I think that the staff would like to keep those in-state kids nice and safe in the state of Wisconsin, and then obviously keep them home and play for the Badgers.
What about any 2026s to keep an eye on here in the basketball?
Yeah, for sure, Von Carvalho, the kid from Oregon the city of Oregon, which is right outside of Madison, who just got offered from Wisconsin. We were at that advanced camp. He later that evening played in the team camp and picked up an offer. He's a kid who plays for Team Hero on the EYBL circuit, which is the Nike circuit. And he had a huge spring. I think a number of schools could get involved, during this July evaluation period here coming up. But Wisconsin got on him early. I think that's a good offer. There's been some comps to Sam Decker just in terms of the length, the explosiveness, and what he's able to do on the offensive side of the ball. So, another kid that you talk about inside the state who Wisconsin would love to keep home. I think we talked about Christian Wiggins last week. He attended Wisconsin's advanced camp. He came with an offer, so I think that's a very good sign for the coaching staff of there's legit interest there. The kid didn't come to earn an offer; he came more to be around the coaching staff, get another look at Madison. So in that 2026 group, those are the two I'd probably keep an eye on. Dazon Hall is there as well. Wisconsin sent out an early offer to him. As a potential point guard from Indianapolis. He's been to campus. So, they are certainly trying to lay that foundation and work on that 2026 group as well as 2025 right now.
Well, let's talk about 2026 over on the football side. The Giant has risen, great handle, by the way, wants to know about 2026 football recruiting and sort of some names, maybe some national prospects to keep an eye out for. John, I've got 5, but I'm going to throw it to you first. On the offensive side of the ball, is there anyone that, obviously last week or 2 weeks ago, I should say, we talked about quarterback play, but where else on the offensive side of the ball do you think fans should keep an eye out?
Yeah, just to touch on quarterback, because obviously I think that's where people would like to go. And I think I'm going to have an article out later today on, we're going to start breaking down that 2026 class, because I think fans, that's what they want to know about with 2025 just about wrapped up. I think the interesting thing just to kind of hit on is, that quarterback recruiting is at an accelerated rate, right? And if you look at, Wisconsin has offered maybe 8 or 9 guys, and of those 8 or 9, 4 or 5 are already committed to schools. And a guy like Tate Reynolds just came off the board yesterday, which is Sunday. He committed to Clemson. So, that is, like I said, at an accelerated pace. So you look at a guy like Jaron Mock, who I think is, I don't want to say he's at the top of their board, but I think in terms of who's realistic in this class, he's probably the first name that pops out to me in terms of, a guy that Wisconsin has a really good chance of landing. I would imagine they kind of maybe try to tighten up the screws on him to put that quarterback in place, because, you go back to last cycle, 1 year ago from now, or I should say not from now, 1 year ago, Landon Locke was already committed. They locked him up early. So, that happens, earlier than other positions. So it'd be very interesting to see if Wisconsin tries to get someone locked up potentially this fall or maybe even earlier. Look at the guys on the opposite side of the ball. A guy like Shahn Alston sticks out to me at running back. He visited, has an offer, and I believe he's scheduled to come back in July for Wisconsin's kind of big second event of the summer for, I'm not sure what they want to call it just yet, but they had the barbecue in June. They'll have something most likely in July. And then, we talked about, I think we talked about him last week. Gavin Mueller, a tight end from Illinois, who is just kind of blowing up right now, had a huge summer, and he did this despite not having any high school tape. So obviously the geography works out well for Wisconsin there with the kid from Illinois, and also his uncle played for the Badgers. So that feels like one that Wisconsin's going to be in, really from start to finish when he's ready to make his decision, whenever that's going to be. And then obviously, you want to talk about in-state kids. 2 offers right now to James Thomas, probably an interior offensive lineman from Oak Creek. He's been on campus a handful of times. And then Samuel Simpson, a kid from River Falls. He has that offer. Was there for camp and then for an unofficial visit as well. Of the 2, I think Simpson might be a little bit more realistic at this point. When I had a chance to talk to him, he, very high in Wisconsin. He's an in-state kid, rooting for the Badgers, all that stuff that you hear, a lot from in-state kids. So, those are the 2 I think you should watch from inside the state in 2026.
Yeah, speaking of the offensive line, I think Tyler Merrill is definitely someone to keep an eye out for in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I mean, he's got all the offers, they want to hear about national recruits. So I got some national recruits, and Tyler Merrill is definitely one of those. Listed as a guard, I think he has the athleticism to play tackle if necessary. I think they do like him, though, on the interior of the offensive line. Going to be a tough one. They've been they pulled Kevin Haywood and Ryan Corey out of Pennsylvania. And so it would be, another coup, I think, in the Keystone State if they were to land Tyler Merrill, who has, everyone from Alabama to Notre Dame, Clemson, Penn State, all over him. He's going to be someone to keep an eye out, but I think the Badgers are right in it there. On the defensive side of the ball, I mean, obviously everyone still wants to talk about defensive line. Titan Davis is someone who, again, as they try to go to Missouri, Clinton and I often talk about, Missouri on the come up when it comes to football talent. He's another kid out of the St. Louis area who, has a lot of offers, but the Badgers are really high on. He's got, a good relationship with Coach Whitlow to begin, but, it's going to be tough. He's got offers from USC and Iowa and, a lot of your, usual Midwest powers, Nebraska, Missouri, obviously the Badgers, Minnesota, Michigan State, but, also Tennessee and Penn State. So he's going to be someone who's going to be highly sought after, but Badgers feel like they're in a good position with him. Linebacker Storm Miller out of Ohio. Obviously the staff is very active in Ohio. A lot of guys they've been, targeting the last couple classes out of the Buckeye State. Storm Miller, I know someone who they think is a really versatile piece in probably could line up at almost any position in the 3-3 at the linebacker level. He can do a little bit of everything, very, very athletic and already sort of starting to fill out his body, but he just got an Ohio State offer, and that's going to be really tough to compete with for an in-state kid in Ohio. At safety, Kaden Gebhardt, also from the state of Ohio, is a kid they've had on campus. And the staff is really high on, and he's probably a little bit under recruited maybe, or at least undervalued by recruiting services in comparison to some of these other guys. But I mean, you look at his offer list; he's got Penn State and Oklahoma and Cincinnati and Indiana, and so I think that he is someone that they're going to target. Or they've already targeted early. We've seen them go after safeties and athletic safeties pretty early, and he's, fits that mold, 6'1", 195 as a sophomore, heading into his junior year. And I feel like, he can really sort of be a standout player for them in the 3-3-5. Safeties are going to love, clearly love playing in that defense. And finally, he's listed as an athlete on Rivals, but the Badgers like him at corner as Jakob Weatherspoon out of Avon, Ohio. He's someone who, is relatively unknown. He's got he doesn't even have a Rivals rating, but he's got offers from Michigan and Ohio State, and is someone who's starting to blow up. Is starting to blow up a little bit this summer. Like I said, he just got that Ohio State offer, and I think he's kind of in the mold of an Emilio Agard. Listed 5'11", 175, but super twitchy, and can sort of, probably move around as a corner, whether it's in the slot or on the outside. So I think those are 5 names for me to keep an eye on for that 26 class. So thank you. The Giant has risen for that one.
Yeah, I'd throw one more out there. Dominic Funk or Dominic Funke. If you're like a Arrested Development fan, I suppose. But he is, in terms of outside linebackers that they like, he's very high up on that board. If not, that top slot there for Matt Mitchell. I know the staff loves that kid. He's been on campus twice. Another one that feels like Wisconsin's going to be there right until the very end. And they've had some success on that West Coast. I think he's from Massachusetts. So, or I'm sorry, did I say East Coast? I'm sorry, East Coast. And obviously, he's going to be a guy that Wisconsin puts a lot of effort into. And like I said, I think that Wisconsin will be there, right until the very end for him.
So following up on that, one of the questions that we had was, some of our I guess I could say our loyal watchers, listeners, readers in the Badgers Den, want sort of a breakdown of the 2026 class in which coaches have started addressing their needs with offers of a specific position group, or does it not work that way? And the truth is, it doesn't quite work that way when it comes to sort of how talent is identified and recruited by this staff. It starts with Max and Pat and Casey, and sort of their team on the recruiting side. The assistant coaches really aren't typically the ones who are going out and identifying talent, even necessarily roster needs. Obviously, they're the assistant coaches play a big part in it, but the player personnel department is actually the folks who are, sort of looking at the roster from a high level and saying, okay, we need to get 5 offensive linemen in this class. We need to make sure that we have, 3 running backs, or that we have, X amount of players at each position for each class, and sort of will, sort of tailor their recruiting to that. Obviously, there are certain kids you don't turn away no matter what, right? Even if you don't need, let's say, a running back, but you can get a Byron Lewis, you go get a Byron Lewis if it's possible, right? Because that sort of talent will trump all. But when it comes to the roster construction, it's really Max, Pat, and Casey first.
Yeah, I would agree. And, it's kind of the evolution of, not only just college football as a whole, but, recruiting. I remember when I started, you would have an assistant coach on your staff who also held the recruiting, coordinator title. And that was for, quite a bit of time. I think Dave Doran was maybe right when I got going. He was, he coached the inside linebackers and he was the recruiting coordinator. So, now you have at, not only Wisconsin, but all these schools, just kind of an army of people who begin that initial work of, digesting the film and just kind of bringing it up the tier to, eventually gets to the assistant coaches. And, specifically at Wisconsin, Max and Pat, and like you talked about Casey, I mean, they play a significant role, not only in the identification process, but, in building those relationships, maintaining those relationships. And, in some cases, maybe in a lot of cases, I would argue that they are more important than the assistant coach that's kind of that lead recruiter. And that's not throwing shade at any assistant coaches. I just think it's the way that Wisconsin's, recruiting department is structured. Having Max and Pat and Casey play such a substantial role in those recruitments. And obviously the results have been, very positive. So it's tough to argue with that formula. I think it's working very well. And I think as much as you can kind of take off the plates of assistant coaches, I think it's a positive all the way around, because, I think if the last couple of years have shown you anything, it's how important that recruiting department is to not only, recruiting, but the portal and just roster construction in general. Wouldn't it be surprising to me in the next couple of years if Wisconsin said, person X is now our general manager. He's just, because other schools have done that too. So this person will serve as our general manager. He might be allocating money to places. He might be allocating how the roster looks. So I think that is coming, not just to Wisconsin, and some schools have done it already, but it's very much taken on the NFL model right now.
Yeah. And, but I think that is also something that is built up in the last 20, 30 years of college football with how much coaches are moving, right? And so Max and Pat and Casey are going to be, much more stable. We would assume, as sort of like on a year to year basis, that they're going to be there for a while. That's what it really feels like. Like those are fixed guys, and they're going to be the ones who are sort of there for the long term. So even if you have, let's say, an assistant coach who goes on to get a promotion or goes on to a bigger job or doesn't mesh, is only there for a year and goes somewhere else, you still have those baseline people who are there with the program, who are going to be with the program. And that's a big advantage than having, say, like, if back to the old model and, you're being recruited by the defensive line coach, then the defensive line coach goes somewhere else and you don't have really any other contact with the university. That's a problem.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Matt. And I think you saw that specifically with Eugene Hilton this year, where Wisconsin was on him very early. And, a lot of that was Mike Brown. But when Mike Brown leaves to Notre Dame, Kenny Guyton steps in and Wisconsin eventually gets him. But from Brown to Guyton, the constant was Pat Lambert. And I think that's a big reason why Wisconsin is never faded in his recruitment, even though, Brown left, or there was a period of time without a coach. And then, obviously, I think Kenny Guyton jumped in and did an excellent job there. But the constant was Pat Lambert. So I think you bring up a very good point. And especially with the amount of transition that there is just in college football on coaching staffs and now with players as well. So it's good to have those constants there that, even if like you talked about, 10 years ago, if your position coach leaves, you're essentially done. Like it's almost too difficult to hop back in, depending on, where you are in the recruiting calendar. So now if a coach leaves, you do have those, recruiting people that have been start to finish, and you're never truly out of a recruitment then.
Well, let's talk about Kenny Guyton and the rest of those new coaches, because JYBUW 1980 wants to know how the team is responding to the 4 new coaches. And so I guess I'm going to take the 2 guys on the offensive side of the ball this time, John. I'll throw the defense back to you, because I've had Blazek and Guyton both on the podcast with me and Bernie, so I've at least gotten to talk to them a little bit and get to know them a little bit more. Blazek, obviously, you can see how quickly and well he has meshed with the entire team, but especially the offensive line room. There is a completely different energy from with Blazek. He is, if you're looking for a cultural fit at Wisconsin in terms of an offensive line coach, I don't think you're going to do a whole lot better than him. We also talked with Brady Collins last week. Bernie and I did, and one of the things that Collins said is that, like, this guy came in and since day one has completely sort of reformed and revamped the offensive line room and the way that they meet, the way that they practice, the way that they sort of just go about every single day. And it has been a real shot in the arm for them. And I think that obviously, like, he is adjusted really well. He's an upper Midwest guy, and he is someone who clearly understands, like, Wisconsin and Wisconsin culture, and is fitting right in. Kenny Guyton is one of the most interesting people that we've interviewed. I'm not going to lie, John. He has a demeanor and an affability that is, super present, and just like, he's someone that has a bit of a magnetic aura. Like, you just want to be around him because he exudes, not just like likability, but like coachability. Like, he's very straightforward with his guys, but he's also very, like, fun loving. And I think that the room has been taken to him pretty well. We saw him on, what was the Mic'd Up segment that the Badger football social media team did at the spring practices. And so you just you get to know him, and I think he brings a unique energy, but an eye to detail that only, a former quarterback could have. So I think that both of those guys have done, really well so far in their first 6 months.
Yeah, you took the 2 easy ones, Matt. That wasn't fair.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I think Blazek has been kind of the talk of June, and rightfully so. And I think I'll just be brief. I think with the as much success as he has had recruiting wise, I think that the expectation is that they'll have a similar impact in terms of player development and getting that group back to where that group feels it should be. So I think that, it's going to be twofold with him. You've seen the recruiting punch in the summer, and I do think he'll have a maybe not his immediate impact, but talking to people that are there and know what's going on. I mean, they are really excited about what he's going to be able to do with that group in the fall. You talk about the defense side of the ball. Two very different situations where Alex Grinch is stepping into a room that is veteran laden, and you have arguably the most important guy in the team there, and I would think without a doubt captain and Hunter Wooler. Kamoy Latu is there, Preston Zachman is there, so you have three seniors there who have played a lot of football, and he's going to be able to not only trust them, but I think put them in more unique positions to have success. They did a lot with Wooler this past year. I'm curious to see what they do with him this year, but that is a group that's played a lot of football, and I would say largely proven if they stay healthy. Whitlow's in a different situation there. The defensive line has been talked about quite a bit. They lost some guys. They're thin there, right? I mean, I don't know that you have a group that is, really trusted too deep. I think you have James Thompson, a guy that you can count on. I think he's a good Big Ten player. Kurt Neal has flashed. But beyond those two, Ben Barton, he's older. Cade McDonald, he's older. He's played. Do you get stuff from the younger guys? Can Dylan Johnson come in and play? What do you have in Jamel Howard? Ernest Willard enrolled early for the spring. Could he take a big jump? I just think there are so many question marks there that Whitlow's player development is going to be tested right away. Whereas Grinch, like I talked about, is walking into a group that's, largely established. So, you got to see a little bit in the spring. The defensive line, that's just a group that's going to be, I don't know. I don't know. I think that's the biggest question mark for me. And I mean, that's not a super tough question. I think a lot of people likely feel that way. It's going to be, I think, the biggest question mark of this team. And, I'm not sure that a different position is very close, maybe tight end, but he's got his work cut out for him. I'll just say that. So I'm very curious to see how that group performs, right away, at the start of the season. And, obviously fall camp as well. Do they stick in a lot of, just two down linemen because they don't have the depth? Do you see three down linemen if more guys emerge? I think Mike Tressel will have to get creative based on what he has in the defensive line.
And I also think, though, on things like, obvious third and long situations, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Jaheim Thomas with his hand in the dirt, rushing off the edge either, so it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. We'll finish off here. Speaking of recruiting and on-field staff, who do you guys feel are the best recruiters in the on-field staff? John, I'll throw that one to you first.
Well, we talked. I mean, Blazek, I think you can make a case for him. He has, to say he hit the ground running might be an understatement. Again, like you look at the recruitments of Logan Powell, where he was recruited by just about every school in the country, and for Wisconsin to come in kind of midway through and secure him was a huge recruiting win. Hardy Watts, he had a connection with him at Vanderbilt, so that was someone that he knew, but to get him on campus for just one time and to lock him down when a school like Michigan wanted him quite a bit, I think that speaks volumes to Blazek as well. So, the other guy I would say kind of quietly, Paul Haynes has done, I think, a really nice job when, if you talk about how much people love the cornerback recruiting, then you got to talk about Paul Haynes. And with Paul Haynes, I think, Pat Lambert is there as well. They kind of go hand in hand, but, quietly, I don't think he gets talked about a lot, but, Wisconsin has put together now, maybe in a couple days here, it'll get even a little bit better, but I mean, two very solid cornerback classes. Obviously losing Raheem Stroud was kind of a tough blow, a 4-star kid from Florida, but, I think quietly Paul Haynes has done a very, very nice job on the recruiting front.
Odds on Gentry flipping, you feel pretty good about that?
That seems to be moving in the right direction. From what I was told real quickly, I got a text back saying not a done deal. But, usually those people like to play it a little bit closer to the vest and not, kind of lay their cards out. So I think that's moving in the correct direction. We'll see exactly how that unfolds.
And I'll add a couple more. I think Matt Mitchell's an outstanding recruiter. I think Matt Mitchell really connects with guys and is, especially for, I think both him and Tressel at linebacker, but are both very, very good recruiters. But I think Matt Mitchell is someone who is really good at not only, coach. I think he's an outstanding on the field coach, but I think he's someone who really connects with recruits. And then this is probably cheating, but honestly, the best recruit on staff is Luke Fickell. If you listen to what anyone says who's met him, these recruits, when they get to talk to Coach Fick, I think that, he's on field staff. And so to me, honestly, I think Luke Fickell, he's the closer, right? He's the closer on the staff. They bring him up, bring the recruits up to the office. You talk with Coach Fick, and he's got the presence because he's a big guy, right? He's a nose tackle. He's sick. He's all of 6'4". I'm 6'3", and I've stood next to him, and he's bigger than me. So, and he has a presence, he has an energy, and so metaphorical gun to my head, I think Coach Fick's the best recruiter on staff of the
and that's important, right? Is having the head coach, and that's a question I ask every single kid who takes an official. What was your time like with Coach Fickell? What was his message for you? I think he has a similar message to just about everyone he talks to. I think that the honesty is something that comes out where kids are like, Coach Fick said, if I don't want to work hard, I shouldn't come here. But you've also heard a lot from recruits that Wisconsin doesn't want to be, and the term they use is a transactional program. And that term, like I said, has been brought up by a lot of kids that I talk to. So I think he very much is stressing that we want to do this, not necessarily 100% the old school way, but they want to build this program through high school recruiting. Now, you're always going to use the portal. Every team in the country is doing it, some more than others. But I think that, Wisconsin wants to build this program as much as they possibly can through the high school ranks. And I think that's why you see, Fickell come up so much on these official visits, and, just how much of an impact he is having there and the time he's putting in, because, that's important to him. I think it's important to the core of, what he wants to do at Wisconsin. So, he is very involved in the recruiting, maybe not necessarily the day-to-day, but a lot of times it's like, I know Max is getting a phone call and he's like, let me get you on with Coach Fick. And that's another, so he's doing that kind of stuff, as I'm sure as much as he possibly can, because, not to just kind of go off on a tangent, but you're very much now the CEO of, this billion-dollar enterprise, right? So you're going to be pulled in a lot of different directions. So, the time that he invests in recruiting, I think is evident. And I think it's very important for what he wants to do at Wisconsin.
Absolutely. Well, John, you are very important for what I want to do on a weekly basis, and that is BadgerBlitz TV, part of the Rivals.com network. We appreciate everyone tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to BadgerBlitz for all of the best information, discussion boards, and everything else related to Wisconsin athletics. We'll be back next week, and until then, we'll see you in the den.